following on from that, then I guess, interpretation, as you said, I guess you have to be around tongues in order to know if you can interpret. And in your experience, do people know? Do they hear it as if they understand it and then kind of translate it, or is it like God kind of gives them, they hear it and then maybe a translation afterwards? How does that tend to work?
Well, just to be clear, I don't interpret tongues,
Mm-hmm.
so I only know
What you've
what
heard.
they tell me. My wife does. Not always. She doesn't always get interpretation. It's not always like on call, so to speak. There are other people that do. There's a young woman in my church who her husband is our executive pastor, elder in training, but she understands a good bit. Matter of fact, we've done a few deliverances together where I'll pray in tongues and she'll interpret, and in that very moment, we've literally identified what evil spirit we're dealing with and was able to call it out. And so it's been super helpful in that capacity. But from what I've understood, they even doubt it themselves. Like, is this real? Is this really? For her, she just knew what the words meant. But for my wife, she would hear English right next to it. And so what helped my wife to go, oh, wow, that really is interpretation, is there was a time where I prayed in tongues, and I'd pray in and out of tongues, in tongues, and then in English, and then in tongues, and then in English. And she was still questioning whether she was really interpreting. But the interesting thing that happened is I would pray in tongues and she would understand it. Mm-hmm. And then I would pray in English the exact same thing I just prayed in tongues.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So apparently I was interpreting my own tongues, which was a prayer.
Right.
And so she was like, you just said the same thing twice. And I did that over and over again. And she didn't tell me till afterwards.
So it's like your spirit and your mind were in sync on that prayer, because I know it's really your spirit praying on,
right,
almost without your input. So it's interesting in that case that... Sorry.
Yeah, I want to be... No, I love that you mentioned that passage of scripture. It says when I pray in a tongue, my spirit prays, but my mind is fruitless.
Right.
But just to be really clear, when people use the word, do you pray in the spirit? I go, what does that mean? I think certainly praying in tongues is praying in the spirit, but I think praying in English is also praying in the spirit. I don't think that for your prayer to be spiritual, it has to be tongues. I don't even think that for your prayer to be answered and heard by God and powerful, I don't think it has to be in tongues. I think, what makes your prayers powerful and effective, from what we know in Scripture, is not the language you pray in, but rather the humility in your heart. God opposes the proud; He gives grace to the humble. He hears the prayers of the proud from afar, but He's near to those who are contrite in spirit.